Olowo-Ake Teaching Hospital in Kaduna, Dr. Shuaibu Musa. Also joining us is humanitarian crisis expert and global affairs analyst, Bayo Olowo-Ake. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on TVC News at 7. Let's begin with you, Dr. Musa. What is the latest from Kaduna regarding this incident? If you can hear me, Dr. Shuaibu Musa, I'm asking about updates on the state of victims who have been brought to the hospital you oversee.
Yes, good evening, viewers.
All right, we'll return to Dr. Musa shortly, but let's bring in Mr. Olowo-Ake. Well, the military has admitted that this was done in error. How could this have happened?
Well, it's very tragic and quite unfortunate. But these kinds of incidents do happen. And we know, for instance, that the Army has confirmed that the particular operation was led by, was undertaken by an aircraft in the Nigerian Army Aviation, most likely a drone, which is an unmanned aerial vehicle. And also from reports available, they suggested that the unfortunate incident happened when a crowd had milled under a tree, following the particular pattern of insurgents. Now, this kind of strike is called a signature strike. And I need to just explain briefly what a signature strike is. If, for instance, the military is targeting the leader of maybe an insurgent group, and over time they find out that he has a particular pattern of behavior. Say, for example, he sits under a mango tree, say, every Saturday evening with his commanders. And over a period of time, they confirm that that habit never fails. And then they dispatch a drone to strike on the Saturday evening at that particular time. But then on this particular day, it happens that this gentleman maybe gives way to maybe a village party because there's a wedding or something. So he vacates the tree and allows the villagers to have their wedding under the tree. Because it is consistent to have a crowd under that tree at that particular time on Saturdays, those operating the drone assume it is the same pattern, it is the same person, and they drop the payload. That is called a signature strike. And most 80% of the accidents you have of hitting the wrong targets usually occur as a result of signature strikes. From the description that has been given, I listened to the Chief of Defense Staff speak. From the explanation he gave, this falls within the scope of a signature strike. Now the question is, what is the protocol which is normally used to govern the authorization of a signature strike? Of course, we will not know that, it to be classified. But I think the military would have to review whatever protocols they have for launching a signature strike. And there are lessons to be learned from Afghanistan, where the US made a lot of signature strikes and hit the wrong targets a lot of times. In Yemen, where the Saudis made a lot of signature strikes and actually hit several wedding parties, if you follow the war in Yemen. And then in Pakistan, where the Pakistani military as well, launching drone in signature strike operations, also usually hit wrong targets. So I believe the military ought to have studied this particular kind of strikes, in order to ensure that we do not have this unfortunate level of casualties.
I hear you, Mr. Olowo-Ake, and this definitely has happened. And then I'm curious as to what you think this says about our intelligence gathering and the need for our sources to actually be spot on.
Frankly, it's going to be difficult to assess our intelligence gathering as a consequence of what has happened. Because, for instance, if you look at the track, if we look at the trend, in 2017, we had a similar incident in Ran, near the border with Cameroon, where 112 people were killed, civilians were killed. That was a Nigerian Air Force operation. And then in September 2021, on the shores of Lake Chad in Daban Masara, we also had an unfortunate strike by Nigerian Air Force aircraft, and 20 people were reportedly killed. The trend doesn't suggest monotonous. You know, there's a gap in how these things happen. But if we look at the length of time for which we have been prosecuting this operation against insurgents, a lot of operations take place. When we look at these trends and the number of operations that take place, and you compare maybe to the United States operations in Afghanistan or to Saudi operations in Yemen and so on, there may not be cause for concern. But of course, the major worry is that civilians are being killed, and that should be extremely worrisome. This particular number is huge. And in the case of RAN, we lost 112 people. That was also very huge. So I feel that there's a need to review the protocols. I don't think the problem is actually the intelligence. I think the problem could be the protocols. Also, when drone technology was becoming common, there were already fears by a lot of experts that we will begin to witness this kind of incidents. I give you a quick reason why. If you had used a human pilot, even if he was given the wrong intelligence, or if the scenario had changed, the intelligence may be right, but the scenario might change before the operation commences. A human pilot can avert the mission. If he or she gets to the area and discovers that, oh, this is not the bandits or the Boko Haram leader have been told is here, this looks like women and children at a party, he can abort the mission. A drone may not be able to abort such a mission. This is one major distinction between an operation led by a human pilot in the aircraft and a drone being flown by somebody sitting in a comfortable room, maybe 500, 600 kilometers away. So I think the protocol for signature strikes have to be reviewed. That is not saying that the intelligence should not be right, but I don't think really that it could be an intelligence problem, because intelligence itself is dynamic.
And while not holding brief for the military, we have been told that the area where this incident took place is actually infested with terrorists. So do you think there was a better way this could have happened, or was this the only option?
There definitely could have been a better way in which it could have happened. I had the CDS explain, and I commend him for coming out and for the military for accepting responsibility. But what I just want to say is that I don't think it's sufficient to say that we shouldn't review this because we do not want to reduce the morale of our troops. Definitely, we don't want to reduce the morale of our troops. But that does not mean that we should not emphasize the need for our troops to conform to all the provisions, especially of Common Article 3 of the Geneva Conventions, which is applicable in this kind of conflicts, either non-international armed conflicts, including asymmetric warfare. I think the military needs to emphasize clearly, that command responsibility will be upheld, individual responsibility will be upheld, and the principles of distinction, proportionality, and limitation, as contained in the Geneva Conventions, must also be upheld. I know the military conforms to this, but when you have to go to an area you have just described, where we know that insurgents or bandits will mix with the civilian population, double caution has to be exercised. There have been incidences in the past where even in Nigeria, civilians have said, oh, we were attacked. The Air Force came, but they didn't help us. When you hear comments like that, it suggests that the Air Force pilot was no longer sure that he was not going to hit civilians, and he decided not to drop the bombs. So I think this kind of attitude must be exercised a lot more. And all these principles I have highlighted must be upheld as well.
And from a humanitarian perspective, we've seen the military hierarchy visit. We've seen the president himself express condolences over this incident. And the vice president has now rescheduled his visit to the community till tomorrow, Thursday. But beyond the visits, what do you think government should do? What could be going on behind the scenes in terms of rehabilitation and settling people?
First of all, I think that our hospital facilities have to be improved. If you look at the hospitals where those who unfortunately have become victims of this accidental strike have been taken, it says a lot, as to what we really need to do to upgrade our health facilities. Because otherwise, some who ought to have survived, if the facilities are not up to scratch, they may not be able to survive it. Secondly, I think that there's a need for the military to engage more with local communities, because this will help them in their analysis of their intelligence, and for them to know off the top of, just off the top of their head, sometimes how to exactly review, whatever intelligence has been given. But because, like I said, intelligence is dynamic. At the point where the intelligence is given and where an operation is ordered, before the operation gets to the target area, the intelligence dynamics might have changed. So our forces must have that flexibility. And having that flexibility also has to do with understanding the environment in which we are operating. And that would also mean really engaging with communities, the chiefs, the local people, and knowing what the changes are on the ground, as much as possible. And I think as well that our community leaders, I think, frankly, they have done a lot, given this especially in the last 48 hours. There's been a lot of engagement with the community. The political leaders, the military leaders, I think they've shown commitment, they've shown remorse, they've shown concern, for those who have been affected. But I also feel that as much as possible, given what the CDS said, they have to make sure this doesn't happen again. It's been recurring too many times.
I sincerely appreciate you for talking to us. Humanitarian crisis expert and global affairs analyst, Bayo Olowo-Ake. Thank you very much for joining us on TVC News at 7.